Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Number the lighthouse at Widow's Point. I never wanted to be a lighthouse keeper. The isolation, the monotony, the constant assault of wind and waves, none of it appealed to me. But when life deals you a losing hand, sometimes you take whatever job comes your way. That's how I found myself at Widow's Point Lighthouse, perched on a rocky outcropping 50 miles from the nearest town on Maine's unforgiving coast. The previous keeper had left without notice, just disappeared one night, according to Mr. Holloway from the Maritime Safety Administration. They found his logbook with entries that grew increasingly erratic, culminating in a final scrawled message. "They're coming again tonight, God help me." The Coast Guard searched for 3 days before declaring him lost at sea. "Probably fell off the rocks during that storm last month," Holloway said, handing me the keys. "It happens. The isolation gets to some people, makes them careless." He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. I didn't care about the circumstances. After Sarah's death, I needed to get away, needed the isolation, needed the punishment of this godforsaken rock. The lighthouse stood like a sentinel of judgment, its beams sweeping across the dark waters as if searching for lost souls. I felt right at home. The first few weeks passed without incident. I maintained the light, kept the logs, and radioed in my daily reports. The routine was mind-numbing, which suited me perfectly. I didn't want to think, didn't want to remember. The crashing waves and howling wind drowned out my thoughts during the day. At night, I drank until I passed out. It wasn't living, but it was existing, and that was enough. Then came the fog. It rolled in one evening, thick as cotton, obscuring everything beyond the lighthouse walls. The beam cut through it like a knife, but the light seemed to stop short, swallowed by the impenetrable gray. I increased the foghorn interval as per protocol and settled in for what promised to be a long night. That's when I saw the first ship. It appeared suddenly, a dark shape emerging from the fog about a quarter-mile offshore. An old fishing trawler, its hull weathered and patched, no running lights, no radio contact, just drifting silently toward the rocks. I grabbed the radio. "Vessel approaching Widow's Point. This is Lighthouse Keeper Daniel Hayes. You're heading for dangerous waters. Alter your course immediately." No response. I tried again, more urgently. Still nothing. Cursing, I ran outside with a spotlight, aiming it at the vessel while continuing to shout warnings through my megaphone. The ship maintained its course, slow but steady, as if drawn to the jagged rocks below. Then, just as impact seemed inevitable, the fog thickened. When it cleared seconds later, the ship was gone, vanished, no crash, no debris, nothing. I stood there, spotlight still in hand, scanning the waters. Had I imagined it? I hadn't been drinking yet that night. I was certain I'd seen a ship. Back inside, I checked the logbook of the previous keeper, wondering if he'd experienced anything similar. His entries mentioned unusual fog patterns and shadow vessels, but nothing concrete. I made my own entry, detailing what I'd seen, then poured myself a double whiskey and tried to forget about it. The next night brought more fog, and with it, another ship. This one was larger, a cargo vessel with rust-streaked sides and dark, empty portholes. Like the trawler, it had no running lights and didn't respond to radio calls. It too vanished before striking the rocks. Over the next week, the pattern continued. Ships of various types appearing in the fog, always on a collision course with the rocks, always disappearing at the last moment. I documented each sighting meticulously, though I began to doubt my own sanity. Was grief playing tricks on my mind? Was the isolation affecting me already? Then came the night I saw the faces. The fog was particularly dense, seeming to press against the windows of the lighthouse like something alive. I'd spotted a small sailboat drifting toward the rocks and was attempting radio contact when I noticed something odd about the vessel. Figures stood on its deck, at least a dozen men and women, motionless, all facing the lighthouse. I trained my spotlight on them. The beam cut through the fog, illuminating their features with stark clarity. They were dead, all of them. Bloated, waterlogged faces with empty eye sockets and gaping mouths. Seaweed tangled in their hair. Crabs scuttled across exposed bone. Yet they stood upright, rigid, staring toward me with those eyeless faces. I dropped the spotlight, stumbling backward until I hit the wall. When I looked again, the sailboat was gone. That night, I broke my rule about checking the previous keeper's personal effects. The Maritime Administration had left his belongings in a trunk in the basement, saying they'd retrieve them, eventually. I'd never been tempted to look before, but now I needed answers. The trunk contained clothes, books, some photographs, normal possessions. At the bottom, however, I found a journal separate from the official logbook. Its pages were filled with increasingly frantic writing. March 15. Saw another ghost ship tonight, third this week. They're coming more frequently now. March 18. The ships are bringing something to shore. I see them at night, crawling up the rocks. Not human, not anymore. March 22. They watch me from the water. I've boarded up the lower windows. Can't sleep. March 25. Found the records in the basement. This has been happening for decades. Every keeper before me saw them too. Some disappeared, some killed themselves. Some just went mad. March 30, they're coming again tonight. God help me. The last entry matched the final log in the official book. I sat there, journal in hand, as the foghorn blared its warning into the night. The previous keeper hadn't fallen from the rocks. He'd seen what I was seeing now, and it had driven him to, what, suicide, flight, or had something taken him? I spent the rest of the night researching the lighthouse's history, digging through old records stored in filing cabinets in the basement. What I found chilled me more than the apparitions themselves. Widow's Point Lighthouse had been built in 1871, replacing an earlier light that had burned down under mysterious circumstances. Since then it had seen 23 keepers. 14 had disappeared without a trace. 6 had committed suicide. 3 had been committed to asylums, raving about the dead that walk from the sea. The area itself had a grim history. In the 18th century, a slave ship called the Covenant had wrecked on these rocks during a storm. All 214 souls aboard had perished. Before that, the indigenous people had avoided the area, believing it to be a thin place, a spot where the veil between worlds was permeable. I read until dawn, piecing together the lighthouse's dark history. When morning came, bringing with it clear skies and sunshine, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. Ghost stories and coincidences, nothing more. The isolation was getting to me, just as Holloway had suggested. I called in my daily report, briefly considering mentioning the ships but deciding against it. They'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. That afternoon I walked the perimeter of the small island, checking the rocks where I'd seen the vessels heading. There was no evidence of any ships having struck recently, no debris, no oil slicks, nothing to suggest my visions had been real. As I turned to head back to the lighthouse, something caught my eye. A small object wedged between two rocks near the waterline. I climbed down carefully and retrieved it. It was a pocket watch, old and crusted with salt. The face was cracked, the hand stopped at 11:17. I pried it open, finding an inscription inside. To James, may you always find your way home. Your loving wife, Alina. The name struck me. James Thorne had been the lighthouse keeper from 1912 to 1914, according to the records. He disappeared during a November storm. His body had never been recovered. I should have thrown the watch back into the sea. Instead, I pocketed it, feeling its weight like an accusation against my thigh as I climbed back up to the lighthouse. That night, the fog returned, thicker than ever. I maintained my duties mechanically, increasing the foghorn interval, checking the light, logging the weather conditions. All the while, I watched the water, waiting. They didn't disappoint. Just after midnight, the first vessel appeared, a modern fishing boat with Mariner's Fortune painted on its hull. I recognized it immediately. The Mariner's Fortune had sunk 3 years ago during a storm, taking all hands with it. I'd read about it in the newspaper. I didn't bother with the radio this time. Instead, I watched as it drifted toward the rocks, silent and dark. As it neared, I saw the crew lined up along the rail, 6 men with seaweed-draped faces and empty eye sockets. They raised their arms in unison, pointing at the lighthouse, at me. The fog swallowed them before impact. More ships followed. A lobster boat that had capsized in the 1950s. A pleasure yacht lost in the 1980s, a Coast Guard cutter that had disappeared during a rescue mission in 1977. Each appeared from the fog, approached the rocks, and vanished, their dead crews always watching, always pointing. Then came a ship I didn't recognize from the records, an old wooden vessel with tattered sails and a broken mast. It moved differently than the others, with purpose rather than the aimless drift of the ghost ships. As it neared, I saw the name painted on its bow, Covenant, the slave ship, the one that had wrecked here in the 1700s. Unlike the other vessels, it didn't disappear as it neared the rocks. Instead, it ran aground with a splintering crash that I felt through the stone floor of the lighthouse. Figures began disembarking, dozens of them, climbing over the sides and dropping into the shallow water. They moved jerkily like marionettes with tangled strings, their bodies in various states of decay. They began ascending the rocks toward the lighthouse. I ran to the door, checking that it was locked and barricaded. Then I moved through the circular rooms, securing windows and other potential entrances. All the while, the foghorn blared its warning, a sound that now seemed like a dinner bell calling the dead to feast. Through a window, I watched their approach. Some wore ragged clothes from centuries past. Others were nearly skeletal, with just scraps of flesh clinging to exposed bone. They moved with singular purpose, dragging themselves over the jagged rocks toward the lighthouse. Toward me, I retreated to the lamp room at the top of the tower, the highest point and the only place with a 360-degree view. From there, I could see them surrounding the lighthouse, not just the crew and captives of the Covenant, but others as well. Hundreds of figures emerged from the sea, waterlogged and rotting, yet moving with terrible determination. The dead of Widow's Point, come to claim another keeper. They began pounding on the doors and windows, a dull, rhythmic thudding that matched the foghorn's blare. I tried the radio, desperate for any human contact. "Mayday, mayday, this is Widow's Point Lighthouse. I need immediate assistance." Only static answered me. The pounding grew louder. I heard glass breaking somewhere below. They were getting in. In desperation, I pulled out my phone, though I knew there was no service here. To my shock, I had a single bar of reception. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. A voice answered, distorted, barely audible through the static. "911, what's your emergency?" "This is Daniel Hayes at Widow's Point Lighthouse. I'm under attack. I need help immediately." "I'm sorry, sir." "Did you say Widow's Point?" The voice sounded confused. "Yes, send the Coast Guard, send anyone." There was a long pause, then, "Sir, Widow's Point Lighthouse was decommissioned in 1989. It's been automated for over 30 years. There is no keeper stationed there." The phone slipped from my numb fingers. Automated, that was impossible. I'd been here for weeks. I'd spoken with Holloway from the Maritime Administration. I'd called in daily reports, hadn't I? I looked around the lamp room, really seeing it for the first time. The modern equipment I'd been operating was covered in dust. Cobwebs stretched between the control panels. The logbook where I'd been making entries was yellowed with age. The last entry dated October 17, 1989, the day the lighthouse was automated. Below me, the pounding continued. I heard shambling footsteps on the spiral staircase. They were inside now, coming for me. With trembling hands, I opened the pocket watch I'd found. The inscription was still there, but now I noticed something else, a small photograph tucked into the opposite side of the case. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl. The man was me. The woman was Sarah, the child we'd never had. My memories began to fragment, reality slipping through my fingers like sand. Sarah hadn't died, I had. The storm of 17, my fishing boat capsizing, the cold embrace of the Atlantic. I'd never left these waters. The door to the lamp room burst open. They stood there, the dead of Widow's Point, waterlogged and rotting, just as I must be. In their midst stood the previous keeper, his face bloated and pale, eyes like cloudy marbles. He held out his hand. "Welcome home, Daniel," he said, his voice bubbling through lips that had kissed the ocean floor. "We've been waiting for you." I backed away until I hit the glass walls of the lamp room. The great lens rotated behind me, sending its beam out into the fog, a warning that came too late for all of us. "No," I whispered. "I'm alive. I'm the keeper here." The previous keeper, James Thorne, I realized, the owner of the pocket watch, smiled, revealing barnacle-encrusted teeth. "We're all keepers here, Daniel, keeping watch, keeping others away. Keeping each other company in the long dark." The others moved forward, their cold, wet hands reaching for me. I saw faces I recognized from the records, every keeper who had disappeared over the decades. They had never left. "Just as I would never leave. The ships," I said, understanding dawning. "We're warning them away." James nodded. "The living have no place at Widow's Point. This is our domain now. Our eternity." I thought of the automated lighthouse, its beam cutting through fog that had claimed countless lives over the centuries. I thought of the ships I'd seen, real vessels that had spotted our warnings and changed course, saving themselves from the fate that had befallen us. We were the warning, the ghosts in the machine. As their cold hands closed around me, I felt a strange acceptance wash over me. This was my purpose now, my atonement, my eternity. Outside, the fog began to clear, revealing a small fishing boat approaching the rocks. I could see its running lights, hear the throb of its engine. A living vessel with living souls aboard. Together, we turned toward the window. Together, we raised our arms, pointing away from the rocks, away from our fate. Together, we called the warning that only the truly fortunate would hear. The fishing boat altered course, swinging wide around Widow's Point. Safe. For tonight, at least, I took my place among the keepers of Widow's Point, another soul bound to this rock, this light, this endless vigil. In life, I had sought isolation. In death, I had found my purpose. The lighthouse beam swept across the dark waters, searching for ships to save and souls to claim. And I stood watch, as I would for all eternity, a guardian and a warning in one spectral form. For at Widow's Point, the light never truly goes out and the keeper never truly leaves. The fog will come again tomorrow night, and we will be waiting.